Okay. Three, two, one. Okay, welcome one and all, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the Interstice podcast. We are joined today by Jay. Jay, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So I'm a man who loves stories, so I figured the easiest way is for us to get to know each other. Please tell me a little bit of your story. Like where are you? Where are you from originally? How did you end up here in Japan? All the questions, like how long have you been here? Probably the best place is just like, where are you from originally?
I'm from Texas,
Okay, cool.
and I had a good life there. It was great. Basically, just I don't know, some job stuff happened, and I got a new job, which was awesome at first, and then kind of sucked. And I said, I always did want to check out Tokyo. I had been to Tokyo a few times. I had family who live here,
Oh, that's cool.
and they they made an offer to me a long time, but I just started like this really awesome job, which I worked out for like 8 years.
Oh, wow.
But I said, it was one of those things where like I got a job, and then I told them, I said, guys, I got these tickets to Tokyo. I can do the training for the first week, but the second week I have this trip that is very expensive and I can't cancel. They said, nah, don't worry, just go through the training and then we'll have you start, when you start. I said, okay, great. So I went and did that. On the way home, I was on the Narita Express, and I was told, yeah, you can come back and, check things out here. I know you like it here. So I said, it's a wonderful offer, but, I just got this really awesome job. I don't want to, turn it down now. I even already went through the training. So like, I'm ready to go. So, so I went back to Texas, and I had an awesome job, had a good experience. The economy downturned, and
What year was it? Like what? Because I wonder if it like coincided with the great, collapse of 2008 or whatever. What time was
oh
that
no,
around?
the collapse of 2008 was actually really good for me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I bought my house that year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it was actually a really good thing for me. But yeah, actually, so I got hired at like the height of everything, and then the collapse started happening.
Okay.
So I got hired at the top, and then things started to nosedive.
Hmm.
But it took years for all that to happen. So the industry I was in, it basically needed a lot of there were a lot of long-term projects. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, the projects were canceled or they didn't get renewed due to economic factors. And so, eventually, I think I survived like 3 rounds of layoffs.
Oh, wow.
And on the
Okay.
fourth one, I was told, "Hey, I worked, in a department where I saw how much money came in and how much money exited,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what the percentage was that the company wanted to make."
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I knew based on my spreadsheets that there's probably going to be another layoff. I just
Mm.
didn't know when. So
And
anyway,
this is in America? This was in America
yeah,
that
this
these
is the
lay
States.
Okay,
This is before
okay.
this is
Right.
before I left.
Right.
So this is like 2013, I think,
Okay.
around this time. So anyway, there had already been 3 rounds of layoffs. I knew based on the information I saw as just a regular employee, there was going to be another one. And my boss, was actually really good, still is a good friend of mine. He called me into his office and said, "Hey, there's going to be a fourth layoff." And I said,
Oh.
"Yeah, I know. When?" He said, 6 months from now. And he goes, unfortunately, I can't save you. The thing is, in America, we have some interesting rules about HR. So my department used to have 9 people at the height,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was whittled down to 2. And the other person in my department was pregnant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So doesn't look good when you lay off a pregnant lady, right? So he said, "Yeah, your number's up." So I said, "Okay, I understand." So I found a different job in the meanwhile before that layoff was going to happen.
If you don't mind me asking, like, what was the industry? What was it in?
I want to keep that a little bit private, but
Oh, okay.
I will say this: I worked for 2 of the largest corporations in the world.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sure.
Okay, so I was a nobody. I was a
Okay.
numbered employee. I was a number at a faceless corporation.
We've all been there.
But yeah, absolutely. So basically, yeah, I found another job, and job started out great, and then new manager came in, job turned to garbage, and I said, yeah, I always did want to take up my family member on that offer. So yeah, I called them up and started making plans, and so yeah, I arrived here about 5, 6 years ago. What's it, 2021 now? Yeah, almost 7 years ago now.
So what was the interest? Like what was the kind of affinity that you had with the country? Was it just its alienness? I mean, you said there was family here as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what's the greater connection? What's the affinity?
Oh well, my family member lived here.
Hmm.
That was a big
Yeah,
selling point, definitely. So I always had somewhere to go for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that stuff.
that's cool.
But primarily, I was interested in Japan for a while. I was
Hmm.
never into anime or anything like that, but I took Japanese language in college.
Oh, that's cool. Right on.
So my college only offered 2 semesters worth. So my learning ended at about the N5 level. We really couldn't go any deeper. I primarily went to a business college, so it was introductory to Japanese language 1 and 2, I think was the name of the course.
Okay.
So I spoke a little Japanese, like enough to say where's the library, where's the
Sure.
toilet, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What time is it, all that stuff. So I spoke a little Japanese, not a lot, and I still don't speak great Japanese, but um, yeah. So I mean, I was interested in the country. I had family here, so I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. And I was at a point in my life where my job sucked,
Hmm.
um, and I was not married, and I didn't have any kids. So I said, well, if you're gonna do it, now's the time,
Sure.
because as soon as you get married, like that's it. You're I don't want to poo poo marriage. I'm married now and I love it, but
Right on. Yeah.
it changes things. You can't just go, hey, you know what? I want to move to Singapore. You can't do that. Like
Totally.
the other
Totally.
person has to be 100% on board with that. And so yeah, so from Texas, I said, you know what? I don't have any kids. I don't have a wife. And if I want to go do this, now's the time. So yeah,
Did you end
made it
up in
happen.
Tokyo? Is that where you were first starting?
Yes, yes. I came here, and I wanted to live and work in Tokyo. And
Cool.
honestly, I didn't have a job when I arrived.
Okay.
I
Yep.
had
That
I had
would.
a
Yep.
return ticket. I had 90 days to make it happen,
Yeah.
and I made it happen.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like when if people ask the question, because that sometimes comes up, they're concerned that they get a job beforehand, or is it even possible? It's a road less traveled, but for some people, it ends up making more sense. It seems just the availability of jobs that are here that are looking for people who are already in the country. It is in this one hand like another step up, but then
Right,
obviously I'm sure you had like way more stress because you have, like you said, 90 days that needs to be dealt with, or
right,
you go to the way of the
right.
dodo.
My I had a date that I had to be on the plane,
Hmm.
so my first goal was to not be on that plane.
How were you finding opportunities at that time? Just like the standard like gaijin pot boards, or like anything else? I'm
Yeah,
always curious what other people are using.
so I did all that, and I left my job, the job that I didn't like, right at the end there.
Hmm.
um I want to say it was like 6 or 8 weeks before my flight to Tokyo.
Okay.
So I had a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so I said, okay, well, you should probably hit the ground running, start applying now, tell people, hey, this is when I land,
Hmm.
and see what happens. And I think that was beneficial
Sure.
because they didn't have to pay for me to get over there, or I wasn't wishy-washy. I said, hey, this is my flight itinerary. Like, I'll see you on Thursday if you want to talk to me. I
Totally.
had already made the commitment to go.
That's
And
actually
actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no. You go ahead. Continue.
Oh, yeah. So I already had a face-to-face interview, and then another person was trying to place me, but it was so far outside of Tokyo that I was like, yeah, guys, I'm sorry, I'm not really interested. Um,
Hmm.
so I didn't realize how many jobs were available. And I mean, of course, this was like English teaching. This is
Hmm.
eikaiwa work,
Yeah. Sure.
where that was not my chosen profession.
Oh, it's
It
just
was
entry level, get a foot in the door kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was get that 1 year visa, and then, you know, I can rent an apartment, and you know, now I'm in the place where I want to live and work, and I just need to find, you know, that job that's going to get me to the next step. So
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's I think people far too often like obsess over the first step where
Mhm.
once you're here, once you have a work visa, then you can branch out at that point. And so many of these first places that people are like laboring over, like, do I go with Eon or do I go with Interact or Berlitz? It's like they're all the same. It's to be
Right.
spending time on these. I think it's always to your detriment. Where one thing that you raised there, though, which is actually a great, it seems like the simplest thing in the world, but it's a really good point where just because you're coming over here and you don't yet have it doesn't mean that you couldn't start the process beforehand, like you were talking about, where you're at least applying before you even arrive, and so the dominoes are falling just as you've entered the country. It's another
Right. And
practical thing.
I think primarily I made the decision that, you know, I had a flight. It was going to land in at Narita Airport at this time. So I already knew I was going to be there. They
Mm-hmm.
knew I was coming. I think a lot of people, even if they do start interviewing, then they're like, oh, okay, you got the job. Okay, well, now I need to, you know, find the money to take the flight over there.
Yeah.
And you know, as somebody who's interviewed and hired people before, um, that's not the answer you want. You want the, yeah, man, I'll be there on Monday. You know?
Well, this is another great point. You raised something, like you even said it from the perspective of the person interviewing, and it's so true. Like another thing where people, they might write and ask, like, what's some advice for the interview, and actually tell them it's usually just to impress upon them how serious you are about actually coming over and actually completing your obligations to your contract, because a lot of these, like their whole business model being based around turnover, means that you get a ton of like really unreliable people. And so the thing that makes
Oh
you
yeah.
most appealing is that you just fulfill your contract. So,
I didn't even do that.
yeah. Okay.
But honestly, the
Yeah.
resume I sent, you know, had these huge corporations on it.
Mm.
So that, you know, I on one hand, I don't feel great about it, but on the other hand, they should have taken one look at my resume and go, he's not here to teach English.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
you know, like the names of the companies and the positions I held with them, you know, there were worker bee positions, but they were in a completely different business sector, covering completely different fields. You know, so it was something that my degree is in.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, they should have said, well, this guy's going to be here for like, you know, 6 months and then move on. But I think that they're so desperate for people, especially in the Eikaiwa game,
Yeah.
that okay, you know, they're alive and they speak English natively, you're hired, you know.
Yeah, and I mean that's the name of the game. Like I tell people, the whole thing is that you are utterly disposable to them, and that's their whole that's their whole that's their business model. But
Yeah.
then in the same token, that you can act accordingly. These are, I mean, you're going to have an immediate glass ceiling if you think that you're going to come over here and work your way up through the ranks, where, like, they're probably, if you do that, it's more of an annoyance to them because those positions are filled and you're just coming over to fill what they expect. If you either make it through a contract or make it through half of it, that you'll get out of the way for the next person that will come over and be useful to them, in that they can pay you a minimum salary. So
Right.
for you to come over, use them as a stepping stone, it works. It's like, it's what they expect, it's what you should expect. And
I certainly didn't feel that way when I announced my departure, but
okay.
that's another story.
All right, yeah, sure.
But yeah, like you
Interesting
said
to get
about the
into.
glass ceiling, the glass ceiling is so low, you need to duck when you get in the front door.
Yeah.
It's real. Like, basically, this is your salary. I think legally the minimum amount that they can pay you is 3 million yen a year in order to obtain a 1 year working visa. So it's not a super high amount of money. And then once you, and now people offer less than that. I got offered less than, I said no. But yeah, there's like a minimum amount, and you could work there for 15 years. You're you know, maybe you'll make 5% more over time or something like that, but it's very rare.
Yes. Oh, I mean, they can offer much lower than that. Like I had somebody recently. I mean, again, it's just a sort of distillation of this same kind of disposable turnover. Where when I first came, they were paying about 250,000 yen per month, which was, it's not great. It's entry level.
That's 3 million yen a year.
Okay, there you go.
That's the minimum. Yeah. Well, as far as I know.
And so there's the minimum, and it was just kind of like, it is what it is. It's like you're coming into an entry level position, usually based on the fact that you don't actually, as an ALT, for many of these companies, you don't need teaching experience. And so for somebody who's working, just say, for example, like a service industry job back in North America, that can oftentimes be an upgrade. So it's kind of like it's a match made in heaven. You're just like, you're getting a little bit of an upgrade. You're having an experience in a foreign land, which is very exciting, but don't expect it to be more than that. But man, the squeeze over time, like as I've heard people, and they'll write and they'll say, like, does this sound reasonable? I had somebody who wrote to me recently where they're offering them 190,000 yen per month on their contract. I was just like, man,
before taxes, and they take the apartment out, right?
Right. And it's
so basically that's like $800 a month to live. That's very difficult to do.
Oh, dude, it's insane. And to my point where I say, if they're going to treat you as this disposable kind of pawn on the board, then if you want to look for something that is immediately better, you're not treating them any different. They can't have a higher expectation than that if they're going to pay you this like criminally low wage. Of course, your employees are going to look elsewhere, but then nothing needs to be taken personally. They know the game that they're playing, and you should come over knowing the game that you're going to play to better your situation. The only people, I guess it's like I don't necessarily feel bad for them, but I'm like, you got to have your eyes open. I mean, when I first arrived, I met people when I started at one of the large dispatch companies, and I met people who'd been there for like 10 years. And you've either like made total peace with that lifestyle, or you've got to be asking more questions about where your life's gonna go. I'm curious because the Tokyo angle is actually pretty sweet. Like, where did you end up in Tokyo?
I ended up, where the heck was I? I was in the 23 wards.
Okay.
So do you know Suginami?
Yeah, I do.
It's one of the one of the wards. So I lived out there. It was it kind of sucked because it was, if I took the train, it was a good hour to get to Shinjuku or Shibuya. Now, mind you, at the time, I'm single. You know, I'm looking for, you know, like the next job.
Yep.
So I was out there, and it was just like, man, this kind of sucks, because the apartment was just given to me, right? They say, we're going to put you here. And there's no like, well, can I live in Shibuya instead? They're like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
So that was that. So I had to live out there. And yeah, I went around, and it was always a good hour to get into town and a good hour to get back. So it kind of like forced you to stay in the local area. And I don't know if you know Suganami or whatever, but it's a veteran community. There's nothing out there. There's little ramen shops and all that stuff, but you know, your buddies aren't like, oh, hey dude, I'll meet you at Suganami station. No, you're like, they're going to be like, I'm in Shibuya, I'm in Shinjuku, I'm in Roppongi, come visit, you know?
Yeah.
So, so I lived kind of far out, and it sucked. So the first thing I did when I got that next job was I moved into the city, like into the inner city.
Okay.
So
where was that? Where did you go next?
I lived in Shibuya for like 4 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's cool. What was the what was the step into there? Where had you moved at that point? What was the new vocation? Was it still working with Eikaiwas? Were you direct hire?
No. I got a permanent position in the IT industry.
Oh, okay, cool.
So nice. So I was with that company for like 4 years. And then I had switched departments, gotten a huge raise, was like super happy with myself. Then the department I was in actually didn't make any money. So that department folded. And how many of us were there? There were 12 11 or 12 of us. Only 2 people remained. And it was like this guy who was like this super duper awesome programmer guy and the department head.
Okay.
So basically they went, we were making software. So, so what happened was the department head kept the one guy who held everything together and then got rid of everybody else.
Okay.
And so, and then I got another, I work for a different company now.
What was the what were you are you a software designer or a like server technician? What element of the IT are you and were you involved with?
I was a jack of all trades at that company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's something, again, it's like other things I advocate for when I'm talking to people, because of course another big question for people living here is like, if I were not to do teaching, what is an alternative to that? And probably big for me, just because it kind of like falls into like a subset of interests I have, is IT, because you can get.
If I could give advice, if you want to get into IT, so first get over here, you know, sing the ABC songs with kids for a couple months, but get a certification, get a CCNA, get your ITIL. Those are stepping stones. Entry level IT position probably could make $4 to $5 million a year. If you have a certification, and then keep on moving up from there, you know, because you can get like I think CCNA has 2 or 3 levels. I forget. But if you're certified,
quick interjection,
you don't even need to speak Japanese
for the for the people who are listening here and they're like, what is that certification granting you, for people who aren't aware? Like, what are you learning in those?
Yeah, it's about server stuff. So like you know how to hook up servers. CCNA is Cisco certified.
Right.
Oh gosh, it's been years, but it's a certification so you know how to hook up like wireless access points and servers, and you know how to do network stuff.
Right.
And then your ITIL it's a little different but similar. Companies will look for either one or the other, or if you have both, that's a bonus. So basically what it says is, you know, you'll like, for example, let's say you work, there's a position open at Amazon at their data warehouse. Like your day would be like, oh, hey, 20 servers showed up and we need these installed with this configuration by the end of the week.
Right.
And so then for the rest of the whole week, you're just like setting up servers and stuff. It's not that manual. It's a respectable job. You'll make some okay money, and you can, I mean, at that level of salary, you can have a 1K apartment in just about any portion of the city, barring a few exceptions. Like, you know, Roppongi, obviously you can't do that. But, you know, you can live in Meguro or Shibuya or Shinjuku or something like that, or basically wherever you want, depending on what your budget is for your housing allowance. But yeah, you know, you can get it's a professional job. You might start on contract, or they might hire you direct. It depends on what they're looking for. So
totally,
but, yeah, definitely get a certification.
And I mean, as well, correct me if I'm wrong, but then like once you've gathered that and you're in there, then there's other specialized certifications, right, that you can then continue to like sort of mark your trajectory. Like if you know, if you want to get into, I mean, maybe this is a little more aspirational after some time and there's things below this, but like, you know, I know that cloud computing is obviously something that's massive for like Amazon. You can go like a bunch of different places at that point, right?
You absolutely can. Once you're in a company, okay?
Yeah.
Like they'll tell you, hey, we need somebody who's AWS, which is the Amazon cloud service. We need somebody who's certified in this, or we need somebody who knows their stuff.
Right.
Like sometimes the company, like my current company, I'm certified in my stuff. They said, well, we need somebody who does this. And I'm like, cool, I'm certified in that. And they're like, oh, cool, you're hired.
Right.
So they didn't require a certification, but because I had it, that put, you know, I'm standing on the shoulders of the people who didn't.
Yes, you know? yes, totally.
So if somebody, you know, once you're in the company and they're like, yeah, we really need people to know X, Y, and Z, you go, oh yeah, okay, cool. So then, you know, and then you get that certification, you talk to your boss, go, hey man, here's my certification. Like, I mean, I can do the different work. Is it worth a promotion? You know? And even if they just hand you additional work for no extra pay and no extra promotion or anything, Well, you're certified, so somebody's willing to pay for that. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be that company.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a really, and I mean, you touched on a point there before, like the whole, it's so in demand, and it's a skilled, certified position that you're getting that many of them. This becomes touchy. Like I'll elaborate on this a little bit, but like
Mhm.
that the language is not so much a priority. Now, I always like to add the caveat to this. I do think living in a foreign country that just because you can then not have to have that as a requirement, you should still aspire. It's like
Yeah,
just now
I've
because
been.
you don't
That's a
have to.
detriment. That's
Yeah.
a detriment to me because every position I've had
Mm,
requires no Japanese. English is spoken at work,
sure.
wherever I've been employed. So even when I was laid off, I was trying to find a company that like, okay, well maybe 20% of the time I have to use Japanese because then I
Mm,
can use it, you know, 1 day out of 5 or whatever, 2.5 hours a day every day. I
hmm.
said that'll increase my knowledge and my confidence in speaking. But unfortunately, no language. But like I said, I've interviewed people and hired people before,
Hmm.
and the issue isn't do you speak Japanese? Because usually I'm saying, do you know JavaScript? Do you
Yeah.
know Python? Do
Yeah.
you know C++? That's the language I'm concerned with. You need to talk to the servers and tell them to do what the company needs them to do, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So
sure.
Japanese is cool. That's great. The very high up bosses, probably would prefer to converse in Japanese, but the your opportunity to speak to them would be few and far between, if any.
Right. So it becomes at that point, I just tell people, I'm like, don't let it become a reason that you never look at the language again. It's
Mm.
awesome. Like, I don't think that there should be fame in the advantage, or sorry, shame in the advantage that is afforded you for the fact that you don't have to have an N2, but just use that then as like, oh, okay, so now that it's not do or die, I could still do this on my own terms now. But it becomes very personal at that point because, like you've stated like 100% clearly, crystal here, that it's not going to be a part of the equation at that point for a lot of people,
Yeah,
if
and,
that's
and
what you're into.
that's specifically in the IT sector. If like there are people who they go into sales or they go into recruiting,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna need to know. You have to know Japanese for that kind of stuff
Right.
because there's, I guess they call it the gaijin bubble, and that term is used for many different things, but specifically like um, foreign-owned businesses.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big crowd. There's probably like 20 big ones
Mm-hmm.
that employ the majority of those folks. And outside that sphere, like you just need to speak 100% Japanese all the time. And there are very few people who are comfortable in that situation.
Sure. Sure. So this is cool. We're painting a picture here. You're in Shibuya. You're working for the IT company.
Mm-hmm.
What are some fond memories from the Shibuya days?
Well, the thing I loved about Shibuya was, young and single,
Mm.
and I would go downtown
Mm-hmm.
and I would just, I would be on Center Guy. I would go to Roppongi sometimes, but usually, Shibuya was my town.
Okay.
So I love Shibuya. My wife and I, we were just there today shopping. We want to move back there. There was an area, where I used to live. I
Okay.
lived in two places in Shibuya, and the second place was far and away the best. Really nice area of town. I got this really great deal on this apartment there, and I was just like, I don't know how I'm only paying this much and get to live here. This is awesome. But it was like a 20-minute walk to Shibuya Crossing, so
Oh
I'd
wow.
miss the last train, and my buddies would be like, "Oh man, we gotta stay up for another 3 hours." And they're like, "I don't. See you later." And I'd walk home, or stumble. Stumble would be a more
Yeah,
appropriate
yeah, the
verb.
appropriate verb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love Shibuya, and it's a good place because there's a lot of international people, but
Sure.
also there's a lot of local people that want to improve their English skills.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who
International
wants
feel.
to, yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. So if you're somebody who like maybe you want to give private lessons or something like that, that's definitely an avenue you can look into. Hit up the international areas. People always want to improve.
Yeah.
I never did that myself. I was like, I'm done with teaching. That's it. Forget it. Kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. I was like, I don't want to do that at all.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I met my wife in Shibuya at an event,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
yeah, and
IT or like just social related
it
or
was a social event. It was a social
okay.
event, and I met her there, and yeah, we dated for a while and got married and everything. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't looking for, I wasn't one of those guys with, you can bleep me out or whatever if you want to, but I wasn't one of those guys with yellow fever or anything like that. I wasn't like, oh, Asian girls are the best. Like I dated, oh God, I mean, I dated just about every type of person under the sun. Um, but I met my wife. She had qualities I wanted in a person, and we got along great, and we always have, even now we still have fun, and
Yeah, yeah, cool.
that's what it's all about. So I met my lady there, and yeah, I didn't need to be living this single lifestyle in Shibuya anymore. So I moved away, but we love that neighborhood, and we definitely want to move back to Shibuya at some point. So we're saving up money for a house and all that stuff, or maybe we'll buy an apartment or something. But yeah, we're
Cool.
we're
cool.
in that phase of life now.
Hey man, and even if you had yellow fever, it's one of the strangest things these days where I'm like, why do people need to feel guilty for a sexual preference? It's like that's like saying you can't like the color blue. It's like there's some sort of stigma attached with liking blue. If somebody likes something, just go for it. You're not hurting anybody else. I mean, if anything, you're empowering this whole group of people with your attention. Like, I mean, that's why I've never had an issue with like if somebody like that, the term would be like a gaijin hunter, right? Well,
Yeah, I got scoped up by a few of those, unfortunately.
right. It's like finding somebody in life that can be a huge challenge. This person's giving you like a +1 just by virtue of your international background. I'm like, hey, life's tough enough as it is. If these people find each other in that way, you're both happy. It's nobody else's business. Enjoy your whatever. Let your freak flag fly, as they say.
Well,
whatever it is.
Yeah, on our podcast we say we don't yuck anybody's yum.
That's the expression.
Whatever you want to do, is fine with the three of us. So yeah, I mean, I didn't come over here looking for a specific race of I mean, I dated Australian girls. Sure. I dated Korean girls. I dated half girls. I dated American girls. And my wife wasn't the first Japanese woman I dated, but she's the last, and hopefully she's the last. I'm so glad. I see all these things going on in America, and I'm like, wow, I am so happy I'm here, and I'm so happy I'm out of the dating game.
How long have you guys been together?
4 years, 5 years, going on 5, I guess.
Okay, right. Do you have kids, or are you?
Yeah, I have a daughter.
Oh,
I have a daughter.
That's lovely.
She's awesome.
Very nice. Very cool.
Yep.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, you're in Shibuya. You love the neighborhood. You ended up getting a really cool apartment, but there came a time in your life where, again, you were ready to move. Where do you go to next?
So after this part, I kind of want to keep my whereabouts private.
Okay.
As you know, on our podcast, we like to protect our anonymity a little bit. Okay. So, but yeah, I moved to the suburbs, into a larger apartment that could accommodate 2 people.
Okay.
As you can imagine, in Shibuya, I could probably afford 20 square meters.
Right.
I think my apartment was 20 and a half square meters or something like that when I lived there. But it's great for a single guy. Yeah. You can iron your clothes and cook dinner. Just spreading your arms in opposite directions. But
Indeed.
it's the single life. So, but yeah, we moved out of Shibuya to the suburbs, and we got a bigger apartment. And then when we found out that the baby was on its way, we moved again to a larger place.
Right.
So, and that's where we are now. But yeah. I mean, moving here kind of sucks because it's so expensive to do. But you do it when you need to do it. And actually, currently we're in a place that can accommodate a second child.
Oh,
Because I said
okay.
I'm not gonna save up money for 2 years just to move again. I said let's get the biggest place we can get right now with like that extra room.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually talking to you from my man cave, which will
Okay.
become a nursery at some point in the future.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So thinking of expanding that family one more time.
Oh yeah.
Right on. Very cool. Yeah, my I'm like very very late to the party, but it's kind of like the nature of my life that that's happened because like you were talking about, it's like when you travel, that's not going to afford as many opportunities to like settle down to have the family.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my brothers, they have kids, which is it's extra special when I go back now because I get to watch like my nieces and nephews grow, which I really really enjoy. But I always get I've noticed, I don't know, it's like maybe you could comment on this as well, but I found it kind of funny. It was like you do hit a certain point in your age where you can tell like whatever is the genetic code developing in your head, like how advertisements that used to not affect you suddenly like you kind of get like this sort of misty-eyed sentimentality where if it's like something to do with like children or like the role of a parent, and I'm not even a parent, but I find that hits differently now when I see that stuff where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
perhaps in a different
I
life.
I loved being an uncle
Hmm.
because I'd be like, hey, let's play and have a good time. Yeah, you want to play the game on my phone? Okay, that's great. And then
Yeah.
then when they misbehave, I'm like, okay, dad, time to take care of that on you. So,
Yeah.
I didn't have to do any discipline or I didn't have to, punish or anything like that. So it was like, okay, yeah, oh, you're crying. Okay, yeah, go talk to your mom.
Right. Right.
And, of course it's different now because,
Mm-hmm.
my kid cries. I got to go see what she's doing. And, sometimes there'll be a funny noise. You'd be like, yep, that's one I have to go check out. Or there's not enough noise. That's the worst one. Because
Okay.
then you're like,
Interesting.
oh, I haven't heard her in like 5 minutes. What's she up to? So you got to go check out what's going on.
Right. What's
Usually she's making some sort of noise.
what is something in parenting that has surprised you? Your experience of it.
Um, so far, not much. I'm the last in my family to have a kid.
Okay.
So
Sure.
everybody told me, even before I met my wife, what to expect.
Hmm.
So, I mean, at this point, I've been peed on, I've been pooped on, I've been puked on. Woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to a baby that won't go to sleep. You know, um, yeah. But the thing is, this wasn't a surprise. I knew all this was going to happen. So, when it's time, to change the diaper, you take your watch off. If you're wearing a nice shirt, you take that off.
Yeah.
You roll up your sleeves or whatever, and you do what you got to do. It's gonna be messy. And but you do it, and it's not that bad. And people are like, "Oh my God, you changed a baby." Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do it all day, every day. It's
Right
just
on. Right on. Do
it's
you
just like
guys?
breathing now.
I'm curious. Are you what? How do you guys balance the? I know that like childcare in terms of like if you guys are both working in Japan can be like they've got like waiting lines at childcare like places. Are you guys
Yeah,
like balancing? Is
there's a
that
minimum
difficult for
age
you
for
or?
that. There's a minimum age for that. So my kid doesn't currently qualify for that.
Okay. Okay. I see.
Yeah, I think it's like 4 years old or something like that. So my daughter is not that old. So
So are you guys like just you guys doing the best you can to like weigh it between the two of you? That kind of deal, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of have natural assignments. Obviously, I can't breastfeed, so
Yeah.
so
There's different
she takes care
strengths.
of that, and I take care of the baby during these times, and she takes care of the baby during those times, and it has to do with our our work lives and all that kind of stuff. So we've struck a good balance. Um, with any relationship, I can say communication is king. So if something's not working for you, make sure that you don't keep it bottled inside. Just say, hey, when this happens, you know, it makes me feel this way, or have a healthy way to communicate, and make sure your partner is somebody who would do the same.
Yeah, no
And
doubt. No
and
doubt.
even if they're not, make sure because well, if they're not, encourage them to be.
Mm.
Somebody who communicates first. Yeah. I'm definitely not. I was the hold it all down, don't say anything, and then be upset later. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, I want to tell you day one. And my wife was like, yeah, please do that.
Oh yeah, I mean it just diffuses it, right? As soon as you can speak about it, it's like things. I mean, almost to a cliche, how much we enlarge the problems in our heads, as opposed to like
Yeah.
if we were just to say them, we realize that this didn't need to be a big deal at all. We can just deal with
Yeah.
it and
It
diffuse
makes
it.
you think, why didn't I handle things like this
Mm,
from day one, right?
yeah,
From the get go, because
yeah,
it's a much better way to handle things. But,
yeah.
live and learn.
Do you guys with the kids? Is there kind of like an aspiration? Do you want to like what's the ideal for your kid growing up? Do you want them to be like an international experience of school? Do you want them to go down the more traditional Japanese? Because I know there's different opinions on either side of that.
Yeah. I think this is an active topic of discussion, right?
Oh
So our,
sure,
our
yeah,
baby is very young.
yeah.
And I think right now we've decided we want the baby to go through the traditional Japanese system
Hmm.
up to a point.
Oh, okay,
So I'm
interesting.
thinking maybe middle school will transfer into an international school or something like that because
Cool.
um, I think we want, especially the language stuff, we want the baby to speak both, right? Both
Oh, totally.
English and
Yeah, yeah. Of
Japanese.
course. Great
So
strength.
if they go to school and have to speak Japanese all day, great, because she's not going to get that at home from me. I'm going to speak English to her.
Hmm.
So I want to make sure that both languages are spoken. And I think that might be the best way to handle it. But then again, I'm not sure. I do
Hmm.
have people I can speak to that have had kids before me who, they did it this way, then they did it that way, and they can tell me what mistakes they made and
Hmm.
what they got right. So yeah, I'm an information gathering kind of person.
Hmm.
So I make sure that, yeah, okay, how did Bob do it? Okay, Bob did it this way. He said that didn't work so good. And Tom said he did it this way and it worked out great. So now
Right, right, right.
let's see what works.
Yeah,
Weigh the evidence and make the best choice.
because I mean, absolutely, there is huge. I see this. So, I mean, although it is soon, I am not long for this situation that I'm in now. But one of the coolest things about what I do now, it's a private school which
Mm-hmm.
has an overseas element to it. Like a lot of one of their big things is like we take English very seriously here, and so. They try and get as many kids who had overseas experiences to come to the school. So like
Yeah.
traditional like private Japanese school, but with this like weird internationalness to it, in that they have this priority on trying to seek out these kids. And my experience with them, it's unique. Never had that before, obviously, because I'd never been in a sort of work situation that prioritized this. That you get
Right.
to see the advantage of biculturalism. Like, they obviously, there's strengths and weaknesses to this approach, but you do see embodied in these kind of kids the sort of strengths of each culture. It's like they have like a mindfulness towards consideration and the sort of collectivist values that are like, you couldn't that's is it's like apple pie is to America like collectivism is to Japan. That's just like their thing here. But then you see, because they've had the overseas experience, how comfortable they are at having more of an individualized opinion and not being so afraid of standing out, and how that lets them stand on their own 2 feet. It's a bicultural kids, and I mean, maybe in some unique circumstances you'll find a tricultural or quad. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really cool what that does for them. I mean, you think of the language, right, as the strength that we often think of them gaining if they're going to be in an international school, but I feel that it's with a language. I mean, this is a whole other interesting topic in itself, but you're not just speaking differently, you're thinking differently. Like, the way in which you form concepts is totally dictated by the language that you consider them in. And it's this whole other
Right.
cool thing that happens.
Yeah. I think you and I have been here long enough um, where you see that ideas are formed through language, obviously,
Yeah.
but um, here's what I'll say about English and Japanese language.
Mm.
In English, there's a variety of ways to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in Japanese, there's one way to say many similar things.
Oh,
It
that's
depends
interesting.
on, yeah, because like, I mean, I absolutely loathe Japanese television because they're at some restaurant somewhere
Mm-hmm.
and they eat the food and what's the word that they say?
I guess
Oishi.
oishi or
Tastes good,
umai.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Umai sometimes. Yeah, yeah.
Less so,
Mostly,
less so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But mostly it's oishi. And
Yeah.
so, my wife watches this stuff and I go, they're gonna eat the ramen and say oishi. They're gonna eat the kaki fry and say oishi. And they do it every time. And
Mm.
I said, has there ever been an instance on TV where somebody ate the food and they're like, this doesn't taste so good? And my wife is like, not that I know of. I'm like, it's the same thing all the time. So, but
Mm.
in English, like we can eat the ramen. We can be like, wow, this is delicious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, or you could eat the ramen. You can go, there's it's very fragrant and it has hints of this and that, and like you could like go into like a very deep description. But Japanese language, it's just oishi. That's it.
I do find with the people that I know, when they talk about their experience of bilingualism, like you are describing, which is a very good point, where I mean they love their Japanese language and there's different strengths innate to it, but that they talk about how they describe English as like somewhat liberating in its expressiveness. That like you're talking about the variety to describe like a similar thing feels more open than it does in Japanese. But then you really hit on a cool point there where they may not have that skill or like whatever you want to call it, nuance in their language, that what they do have is perhaps an expression. And I mean, this almost sounds like a cliche, but it's like it's not even transferable. It's a way of thinking that we don't even have available to us, which is like kind of the strength of theirs. It's like this whole feeling, which we might call something else, they've then compartmentalized and created like a specific sort of idiom for that. That we don't even think of expressing emotions in this down this particular
Right.
pathway, which is kind of cool. It's that like you see the world differently. I mean, one of the other things I do now that we're just kind of like on the fun topic of language, like the way Japanese communicates humans. Oh, that sounds deadly racist. Uh, English speakers don't express feelings like the Japanese do. We won't just be standing there. Like, for example, a Japanese person, totally normal for them if they're enjoying something, just to be like, tanoshi. But that means literally like fun.
Fun. Yeah.
Like I was gonna say
The
humans
Japanese
again.
language speaks in concepts.
Right. And how
It's not,
cool
you
is
don't
that?
say, I,
Yeah.
Jay,
Yeah.
or I, Dave Trippin, am having fun.
Yeah.
You just go, this environment is this word, this
Right.
concept,
Right.
fun, right?
Fun. And
So
I like that.
it's general rather than specific. Whereas in English, you get really specific up front.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
it's just cool. I like that. It's you said it very well there when you described it. It's like conceptual expression as opposed to like specific or personal, which is
Right.
it's cool. Like I mean, I probably got to be like the worst student on the planet for the language, but I mean I do love it, and I feel that will take me one day to it. But almost just like there's one thing is speaking the language, the other is like the like just the discussion of it as a whole, and it's so very interesting. Like there was this cool book I read a while ago that was talking about literally what we are now, and it was
Mhm.
saying how you could tell like people who speak different languages when they were shown an image that they see different things. It's like people will predictably pull out different details from an image, which is quite literally the idea of you see the world differently, and it's your language that's like doing that for you, which I think then again also lends to the discussion of like bicultural strengths. It's like you'll see
Mhm.
more altogether if you have that. I mean, I even broke the idea of like going into a third language, but I could totally see it if I could get more of a mastery of Japanese. I get why people keep going. You know, I get why people end up becoming polyglots and into all this other stuff. But
I haven't had good luck with polyglots, as I'm sure you've heard. So,
oh no, I don't know. I don't know.
okay,
Yeah,
well,
not so much.
yeah, okay, nah, it's probably better that you don't. But
okay, all right, sure.
yeah,
No, well, my buddy, he's verging on it. I mean, I feel like if he weren't so busy with other stuff, he'd probably go into it. My like buddy Drew in Kyoto, that is like a dear friend related to me coming over. It's like he's got the Japanese, and now he keeps flirting with other languages. But I feel like if he really got into it, he would probably like have success. Like, because I've noticed, like, one of my buddies, one of the first roommates, get this, like when I first came to Japan, like many foreigners and many foreigners after me and before me, they end up in Leo palaces.
Yep, my first apartment was a Leo Palace.
Right, you know, this song as old as time. And I had a roommate there. His name was Chopra, but he gave himself the nickname so the kids would get it easier. Called himself Chopper, which I believe is a character from One Piece. And he is ethnically Indian, but I mean, he comes from Britain, like, so, you know, ethnically Indian, but he's British. And so he spoke, of course, English, but then he spoke, what was it that he spoke? I think it was Hindu. And people who have the two languages, right, as soon as you'll so much more easily acquire the third, because you're starting to like build such a like scaffolding of grammatical structures. Like for him, I'm pretty sure that the second language, not English, was one that shares the same like verb sequence as Japanese. So
okay.
once you learn Japanese and you understand, like, I can't be for certain, but like I think French is the same way. And actually English is the exception, right? Like English is the one that orders this way, and it's actually most other languages in the world order the other. And so as soon as you can unlock that, then you can start to go down that path, which is just cool, you know, as an interest.
I knew a woman who was from Hong Kong, and so she spoke I think it was Cantonese, and then after the transfer she spoke Mandarin. And so she spoke the two dialects of Chinese, and now she lives here, fluent in English and fluent in Japanese. So she speaks, you know, essentially 4 languages.
That's wild. That just blows my mind when I hear that.
Yeah.
It's
but
so cool.
The thing is, when you get into like the East Asian languages, the kanji is very similar because it's all borrowed from Chinese.
Sure.
So once you kind of have a good idea about kanji and stuff, and you see you see it here, you go, okay, I know the meaning of it. And I kind of did that in reverse. I visited Beijing about half a decade ago, and I was looking at the kanji, and I was like, North Capital. I'm like, what the hell is I'm like, oh shit, that's Beijing. That's the kanji for Beijing. Like, I put it together. Yeah. Sorry, I swore. I don't know if I could swear.
Oh yeah, no, it's all good.
So like, I was like, oh, that makes sense. This is the northern part of the country, and it's the capital, right? So I kind of figured it out. So what little kanji I did know, but yeah. So like, if you understand what the meaning is, and no matter what language you think in, the kanji makes sense just about everywhere.
True. That is, I mean, it's like the hardest nut to crack, but when you do, then it's going to lend itself to like just the whole Southeast Asian thing. Right. So many of the countries here. No, that's cool. Are you, this is a random tangent now. Are you reading anything these days?
Oh, what was the last book I read? Yeah. The last book I read was Tokyo Vice by Jake Adelstein.
Okay.
Or so Adelstein.
What's for the Tokyo Vice ignorant, what's that about? What's the angle there?
So it, you know, my podcast, which you're familiar with, we usually speak about somebody who is related to Japan.
Okay.
And we chose Jake Adelstein. I don't know if it's Adelstein or Adelstein, but Jake We were talking about him,
Okay.
and to
Okay.
do the research, I read his book.
Okay.
So he worked for, I believe it was the Asahi Shimbun in the early to mid 90s,
Okay.
and he
Interesting.
covered the crime reporting beat.
Okay.
And so he wrote a book, which I believe to be highly fictionalized, but he says it's a true story.
Hmm.
Uh, Irregardless, it's a very well written and entertaining book.
Okay.
It's
Cool.
it's a fun read. And it's about him, like being a news reporter and
Hmm.
talking to the police, and then having contacts in the yakuza and the crime syndicates, and he tells a couple stories, crime stories in there. So it's actually, it's got like everything you want. He's like a reporter.
Hmm.
He's on crime scenes. He's talking to criminals, and he even has a little karate mixed in there too. So it's just a fun read. It's a fun read.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
True, not true. I'll let everybody else decide, but it's a fun read. And apparently HBO is going to make it a miniseries or something,
Oh
which I think
wow.
is a
Okay.
good. It's an entertaining enough read that I would love to see it in a visual format.
Right. 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 That's cool. That's not to hijack the topic. It's I had this like wild experience recently where I went in. I like sore throat, burning the candle at both ends. Needed to get some drugs, and I went in to see this doctor, and this guy was like just super kind, like sort of almost like Hollywood-esque bedside manner.
Mm-hmm.
And then like through whatever course our conversation went down, he was like he just revealed to me that he was an author. I was like,
Oh,
oh, that's awesome. This is so cool. Like, and it. Oh, I know what it was. I was talking about some architecture. He was saying he was interested in that, and he wrote on it. But he said I've also done other books. And this book that he brought out, the what is the title again? It was Confessions of a Yakuza, and
oh, okay.
it was the craziest thing because I had this itch when I heard him say it, and I was like, why is that so familiar? He gave me a copy of the book. I was just like, this is the coolest, weirdest international experience ever, running into some like Japanese author when you went to get throat meds. Um, and then when I asked my friend about it afterwards, I was like, this is so cool. This happened. My buddy had read the book, and then I spoke to another friend, and he had read it as well. So I was like, oh, this is the craziest shit. I met this guy. And they're like in the most random way imaginable. I don't have time quite yet to read it, but I think that the topic of like Japanese underworld, specifically Yakuza, it's a really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating story. As much as I do know, like I studied quite a fair bit of Eastern history when I was in university, but the what you discover, like I was doing Chinese history and I would do Korean or I would do Japanese, but what you realize is it's kind of all the same history. There is only one history. It's only for delineation's sake that we make these separations when they're all intertwined with each other. Um, and the element of the Yakuza is so interesting because the Yakuza are sort of, they're the outcome, they're the what would you call it? Well, yeah, let's call it the outcome of the disillusioned soldiers after the war because of the
Mm-hmm.
Japanese like shame honor shame based society. Like people thought they had it bad, treating vets horribly in the West, but like in the Japan, if you were one of these dishonored veterans that had lost the war, then you were below contempt. Yet these were the guys with all these like, with a set of very specific skills. And so they then turned those skills into basically the organized crime that became the Yakuza, which is a sort of like, it's a really fascinating, almost like cautionary tale of like,
Yeah.
treat people that you've entrusted this great responsibility to, even if they fail, with some respect, because they're gonna, if they're not working for you, they're gonna work for themselves or for
Right.
somebody else. It's
If you make them an outcast,
there it
then
is.
they'll become outcasts, right?
That's the better way to put it. If you make them an outcast, then that's how they'll behave, which is just, it's like there's some fascinating stories there to be had.
Mm-hmm.
And like just that era of like Japan post World War, and like I don't like the whole thing. I mean, okay, I don't want to turn it into like a history podcast now, but it's fascinating. Like people often level this criticism at the Japanese that they're not very adaptive, and it's just kind of like they carry on in the way that they do things. But actually, they're one of the most adaptive cultures in the world. If you look at the history, where they went from like a pre-industrial civilization with like manure, collection agencies designed for like your old school traditional homes, to like lighted streets in a decade. Now, don't quote me on that, but like in this incredibly crunched time period, as opposed to the way that it was slowly integrated in European cultures. It's I don't want to. Now I'm like drowning at the podcast, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. Is there just because I like this kind of stuff? Do you like the sort of historical fiction bent, or was that like for sort of like research purposes particularly?
So that particular book was to research the episode of my podcast, of our podcast. I wish I had time to read more, but I do like historical stuff. I guess I would say primarily movies and such, but I don't know. Usually, if you watch a Hollywood movie, they take so many liberties that you go, wait a minute, that guy didn't win the war, that guy died, and stuff like that. So I don't know. I learned a lot of history when I was younger, when I was in high school and college, and if there's a historical event, I'll usually look it up. So, for example, I was watching a movie not too long ago, and I was like, oh yeah, Nanking, that was a pretty bad thing. Let me look into that. And I go, oh yeah, that was way worse than I thought it was. Yeah. So I mean, I'll look into things. I'll look into history. When subjects come up, or I'll watch a movie that's about a certain period of time, and I'll go, wait a minute. I saw Wonder Woman 1984 recently. Okay. I was alive in 1984. I was a little kid, but I was looking into some things, and I'm kind of like, it's like, okay, yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember that. They just kind of said it's 1984, but things that are going on in 1989, we're also going to shove into this movie and make it a big. Make it a big thing. So it was just basically Wonder Woman 1980s, it was like that. So anything 80s related, we're going to shove into this movie,
Oh, right on. Do you have then when you say movies, do you have a particular like genre that you enjoy there, that you kind of like seek out, or is it generally just as a movie buff, you like it all, whatever's good?
As I've gotten older, I don't like a lot of the stuff that comes out. Like, so for example, some of the stuff that's coming out soon, or this year anyway, like the new Dune, I definitely want to check out.
Yeah. That's exciting.
I've never completed the book. I only got about halfway into it when I was in college, I think, and I didn't finish reading it. But I like that. I like that story.
Yes.
I like a lot of like 1980s movies, action movies,
right? Golden era
crime dramas. I'm not a big horror movie guy. I was never really into horror movies. I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino, so if he has a movie come out, I'll watch it. I think the past couple of movies have kind of sucked, but
what about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Not your thing?
Okay, yeah. I like that one. I like that one. But again, it's like this didn't happen. Like he changed history, right? At the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Sorry, spoiler alert, everybody. But I think Inglourious Basterds was like the last really good movie of his.
It was
which also they changed the outcome of history on. But But no, I like Quentin Tarantino. I like his earlier stuff better. But I think he's a good movie maker, and it's always a fun experience to go watch his movies in the theater.
Oh, totally, man. And I like maybe less talked about. I mean, I really like them all. I could get into that, but like The Hateful Eight, as a kind of where I've always found there is a sort of play-like quality to his movies. Like when you listen to it, it sounds like a Shakespearean script, which has a sort of like almost surrealism to it, because you're like, modern movies today, if they're traditionally seen as good, have a naturalism. There's a sort of like it's indiscernible from reality. But his have this like weird layer of like unreality, but it's often in an added eloquence that people have, which I really, really enjoy. And with the
Mhm.
Hateful Eight, it just felt so much like you were watching a performance. Well, it was like on a single stage, right? Because I mean, they had like minor moments where they moved, but the fact that it takes place in that
Yeah.
one house, and yet, like, just as a testament to the guy's skill, that the characters are so strong, the plot is so engrossing that you're wrapped for like the whole period of time during the movie. Um, but I felt like it kind of got the short end of the stick because it got spoiled, and then he less enthusiastically promoted it, and then I felt like nobody talked about it, where it was like,
I don't listen to movie critics or
mm,
reviews or anything like that. Um, I like to go into a movie with like no preconceived notion of if it's good or if it's
mm-hmm,
bad.
mm-hmm,
Now, some things are just they're so awful that like you can't avoid hearing about it. But
sure,
you do what you can. But yeah, I don't like to go into a movie or a play or any sort of media um, listening to what others think first. What I'll do is for example, like my wife and I, we just watched WandaVision, right? That's
okay,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
newest big thing
yeah,
that came out. And so what I would do is I would watch it and then I would go on YouTube and go, okay, episode 7 explained, or episode 7, 10 things you missed, or whatever. And
mm-hmm,
then I would go, oh, okay, yep. So like I want to see the reviews, but
mm-hmm.
only after I have the initial experience of watching it first. And then so I can formulate it in my own mind, and then I can go watch what everybody else thought.
Yeah, man, you make a great point there about personal experience. Like I find that as well for me. Like I have a direct relationship with how much I am anticipating and wanting to see something with how much exposure I allow myself before the thing is released. Like, for example, when The Last of Us 2 was coming out,
Mm-hmm.
go down to like that medium, like games or whatever, I like made a patent effort to like don't go anywhere on Reddit that would have anything to do with it. Don't watch a single review. Don't watch it, just so you can have that kind of like unfiltered personal experience of the thing, which I really think if more people should know about that in terms of like how much better it makes it. Like
Yeah.
if you don't
So did you
care,
play the game?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So I watched a YouTuber. His name is the Rad Brad,
Oh, he's great.
and
I love Brad.
yeah,
Yeah,
um,
he is rad. Yeah.
I watched it from episode 1 to episode whatever. So
Okay.
otherwise I'd have to buy a PlayStation, which I don't want to do.
Mm.
So I watched the whole thing from start to finish, and I was like, okay, so that's what the story was over. But um, that was one of the things, the pieces of media that was ruined before you could even look at it, because
Right. Right.
like
Yeah.
30 days beforehand, um, was it Rockstar? I forget the name of the company that released it, whatever it was, but the company that made
Naughty
it,
Dog. Naughty
Naughty
Dog.
Dog,
There
that's
it
it. Yeah.
is. Yeah.
So Naughty Dog, they released it in such a way that the people who were to review it, they said, you can review it, you can only show this, and you can only talk about this. Otherwise, we're not going to give you an early copy.
Mm.
So they had to agree. So it was when a company does that, it usually means there's something going on where they don't want people to talk about certain things. Usually, a
Yeah.
review is like, like I watch Marquez Brownlee, right? He's a YouTuber. He's a tech YouTuber.
Okay.
Apple sends him stuff early. Okay, Xiaomi, Sony, or sorry, Samsung, whoever, they send him the devices ahead of time
Okay.
before they hit the street, and he does a full on review,
Mm.
and he'll say, yeah, this phone's great. The camera's a little subpar, but besides that, it's a great phone or whatever, right?
Mm.
And he gives his honest review, and I like that. But what Naughty Dog did was they said you can only show stuff from the first 12 hours of the game, and you're not allowed to talk about these characters.
Hmm.
Right. So it kind of set a weird standard for people to review it. And so then people are like, well, why? We know there are other characters involved.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't we talk about them?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was kind of a problem. And then the second step of that problem is people started speculating.
Mm-hmm.
And then people started getting political about it. And you're like, oh, okay, you've taken it one step too far. Now you're two steps too far. The game doesn't even come out till the end of the month. Just wait, wait and play it. And I don't think it was as bad as people said it was. But the first game was so good that it was almost impossible to top it, right? So I think they fell short of how great the first game was, which, quite frankly, was to be expected.
You see, and I mean, I think they exceeded the first in every metric that exists to be weighed. But I think one of the characteristics of this game is its polarization. Like which I love. I mean, I like that there is such a variety of opinions, and I mean, have you ever heard of do you know Noah Caldwell Gervais? You ever heard of him?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
It's another one of these like game essayists, where Brad is like a Let's Player. Then you have then there are the essayists and they're writing their opinions. And I usually love Noah, but like listening to his critique, I was like, I don't know. But, it was all over the place, but certainly
with
had
The
people
Last
talking.
of Us 2, it felt more like a movie that had a point spoiler alert, everybody, skip ahead 5 minutes. Right. I'm sure you'll edit this and all that stuff, but like the whole thing was Ellie finally had that relationship that she wanted. She had a family. They literally lived on a farm with a white picket fence, and the revenge angle came, and then she went on this adventure, and at the end of the adventure, at the very end of the video game, she couldn't even connect with Joel because of the injury she received. So I think you know what I'm talking about, right? Joel taught her how to do something, right? Because of the injury she sustained, she couldn't even do that. So it was like a revenge is bad, It's very anti-Clint Eastwood, where like all of his movies are like, you killed my wife, I'm going to kill everybody that's you and who looks like you and who reminds me of you, So it was like it was a very poetic ending to a movie.
Totally.
It was kind of like not really an action adventure video game that I would like to play. I'm like a Mario guy. Like Mario's the good guy, Koopa's the bad guy. Stuff happens and then you beat the bad guy. I'm an American. I'm very simple in that,
Sure. I do that. I mean, I would argue though, my God, the combat mechanics in that game are some of the most, I would like, dare I say, like the most fluid, reactive, emergent I've ever, like the way in which your environment is interacting with your movements, that it's in your control. It does totally feel like you're manipulating it, but then as at such a high level of production that it appears as though it's staged or pre-recorded was amazing. Like from one attack that goes into a reload that catches someone like just before they knife you, to then momentum mattering in that if you were like forward moving and felt like you had some sort of like weighted advantage, that could then lead to you overpowering them. And then if they were near a railing, that you then use that I like, this is just me talking, where I was like, I would be fascinated to know the complexity of that system, because I thought The Last of Us won that sort of fluidity, that momentum mattered, that the interactivity with the environment, but it was on this whole other level for the action in the second game. But yeah, definitely a very demanding plot, one that I think inevitably doesn't appeal to everyone, because there is something to be said in a story where it's like, as much as, yes, you're writing for someone else, I think you have to accept when you create art, there's some sort of like detaching yourself once it's released into the wild, that it's your art, but then actually art is it's the personal relationship that everybody bonds with it. That's like, it's supposed to be subjective. And there was no way that.
But you're not only talking about art.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about opinions. You're talking about anything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know how far you want to get into my podcast. I know we're gonna talk to you soon on our show, but you know, everything we do, there's a binary response, either positive or negative, right? Okay. So, but that's true in our podcast. It's true in what we do every day in our life. It's true every time we voice an opinion on something. People react, and you know, there are very few people who are in the gray zone. Like you state an opinion, and then there's going to be this people say yes, this people say no, these people say agree, these people say disagree, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, right? And you're never going to say something where 100% of the people go plus or 100% of the people go minus. So anything you put out there, it gets analyzed and it gets agreed or disagreed to, plus or minus, right? So as long as you're at peace with that, I think it's fine. You know, for example, like what we do, yeah, there are people who agree and there are people who disagree. And then there are people who agree loudly and there are people who disagree loudly. And, you know, we put it out there. And just like, you know, this podcast, people are going to put it out there and they're going to say, wow, Jay was awesome. Or, Dave, why'd you have him on? Jay was boring, right? They're going to have this. People are going to have a reaction to this very thing we're recording right now. So as long as we're aware that that's going to be the result, you're fine.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, you make it well. And in fact, I was, in some sense, it's an extension of exactly what you're saying. When I was talking about, you will have with art a subjective experience of that, which means personal, which means everyone creating their own personal experience. But I would add, I'd suggest that there's certainly more than a binary response. People's reactions are more than simply positive and negative. They exist across.
Yeah, there are degrees
nuance,
of positive and degrees of negative. Yeah. Well, nuance means like, well, it could mean this and it could mean that. It's like kind of wishy-washy, right? Is it plus or? But in aggregate, in the totality of things, you might only be slightly plus, but that's still a plus. Or you might only be, or you're extremely negative. That's still negative, right? So there's no, I don't know. There's like agree, disagree, plus, minus, black, white. Okay. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm like a binary thinker. I could totally understand people like, well, when they said this, I agree. But when they said that, I disagreed. But in general, a response to a piece of art or a response to an opinion or a response to a podcast or a movie or a video game, there's going to be a person and they're going to say, I loved it. I liked it. It was good. I didn't think it was that great. I hated it. It was awful. You know, like there are degrees, but in general, of those 6 statements I just made, 3 were positive, 3 were negative.
Yeah, I mean,
if you want to break it down to like just the base stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, if you break it down to a kind of like what is on the spectrum, then I mean, you go into some like D&D rules, right? You have like chaotic evil. You have
right. What is it? It's you have lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, which that doesn't even make sense to me. But yeah.
But it still falls along a spectrum of like positive and negative. True, but I mean, even within that, I mean, I think that there's such a variety of responses to things that don't necessarily, well, I suppose actually, it gets into an interesting discussion then, because somebody could be doing something that when we say positive, well, there's such a myriad of positives There's positive that made me feel excited. There's positive that I found is educational. There's positive that made me realize a weakness in myself. There's a positive in that I was down today and now I feel up, where those things are so disparate that, yeah, you're talking about it's positive, but each is such a different manifestation of what positivity is that, I mean, to say that it's just positive or negative, it's like, yeah, but then there is this whole like world of what you're taking from each of
Right,
those.
right. And like I said, there's different degrees and there's different directions you can take from positive, negative. I'm not saying these, like you said that one of your favorite directors was Darren Aronofsky, right?
Yeah,
And he did Requiem for a Dream, right?
that was actually was the first film I ever watched from him. That's my favorite, I suppose. Yeah.
Wow, man, I hated that movie. But because it made me feel, I was in college and somebody said, "This is a great movie. You should watch it." So I watched it and I was upbeat and chipper. And at the end of that movie, I literally wanted to die.
Yeah.
It was like it made me feel like such garbage after having watched it that I said, "Wow, I don't want to live anymore." Now, of course, I didn't do anything dramatic or anything, but it was just like, wow, I just kind of like, I'm going to take a nap, man. I just need to like not interact with other human beings for a while. So it had that effect on me. So wanting to die after watching something is a pretty visceral reaction. But if you were to place it in general, it would be a negative reaction, right? So like, I don't like that movie. In fact, if I hear that piece of music, what's that, Overture of August or whatever, I forget it's called.
I love the soundtrack.
if I hear that song, I'll turn the radio off. Like I don't even want to hear the song. In fact, Jennifer Connelly, the woman in the movie, I will not watch movies with her in it. I hated that movie so much.
Yeah, so here's
I hated her character so much.
I love your visceral response. Like sometimes
pretty strong.
Reaction is in itself to be valued. Like, so here's an interesting point. So or perhaps it is interesting. I shouldn't make assumptions. That movie it evokes a lot of negativity. Now, if someone were to watch that movie and they had this reaction like you did, now I wouldn't deny that actually my reaction, not to everything, but let's say there was certainly a feeling afterwards that was just sad and like an open wound and the void and empty. But upon reflection of that feeling came a sort of appreciation for what was beautiful in my life. It's kind of like when you've been sick and then when you recover, it's only for the fact that you went through that hell that you realize how important your health was to you. So this thing at a value at initial impression would be so negative, but then the sort of like learned experience that you have from that could be positive. So it's like, this is again where I say like, it's actually things that can be extremely negative. It sort of exists in this weird continuum. Like, not to maybe a little bit of a yin yang, but it's this that it's because binary suggests that it is in these opposing directions, but I think that there's something to be said of it. Well, I guess the word I would use is a continuum, and that you can convert a lot of what ends up being incredibly negative potentially into something is not, it's not always as it seems, I guess.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
so it's so far in one direction, it actually pops over to the other side.
You got it. And so, I wouldn't want to make it more complex than that, because I know a lot of people.
Have you seen a movie called The Virgin Suicides?
Never.
It's
I've
by
heard of it,
Sofia
though.
Coppola, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter.
I like Lost in Translation. That's one of my favorite movies.
Okay, I was neutral on Lost in Translation.
Okay.
It was okay. It was.
But to your movie, what's this? This sounds interesting.
So The Virgin Suicide. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but basically at the end of the movie, I was like, "Wow, why?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, that's the question the director wanted me to ask myself." And
Hmm.
like you kind of realize that at the end of the movie, and you're like, ah, good job, Sophia, you know, because like
Okay.
you watch the whole movie, then you ask yourself that question, you go, that's what she wanted me to ask myself.
Hmm.
Why? And there was no answer, right?
Hmm.
Um, there was another good movie, a Japanese movie actually.
Okay.
The English, I think it was called 1010 or something like that. It was called, it was in the English title was like Walking Around Tokyo.
Okay.
And when I first got here, you know, when I was working for the Eikaiwa, I said, I'm going to watch a whole bunch of Japanese films.
Hmm.
And I stopped that immediately because all Japanese films, unless they're the Yakuza action films, all
Okay.
the Japanese films are like, life is pointless. We're all going to die. And like, that's how I felt about all the films I saw anyway. But this
Okay.
is one of those kind of films where it's like, um, it was done very well.
Hmm.
And there's no concrete resolution at the end of the movie. So you
Okay.
start thinking about it for a couple days afterwards, and you go, okay, well, maybe that guy was his father. And how come the wife who was murdered, her coworkers never seemed to make that wellness check on her? Like they
Hmm.
kept on getting distracted, you know, and like it was actually a really good movie. But as an American, I guess the cinema I'm used to is okay. The good guys win at the end. You know, stuff happens, but at the end, Mario defeats Koopa. Rambo kills the bad guys.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
all that stuff, all that stuff. So
All right.
to have there be like, okay, the movie's over, and you're like, oh, but like the guy, did he go to the police? You know, did the guy spend the money? Did he pay his debt, or is he going to gamble it away? You know, like there's all these questions
Hmm.
that still happened, and I it's interesting. I like movies and I don't like movies like that.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
like it because you start to think about it,
Hmm.
but I don't like it because nobody writes the ending. It's kind of like lazy writing to me.
Hmm.
So for example, a long time ago,
Hmm.
I was reading a book called The Giver,
Oh, okay.
and that
What?
had a um like an open-ended ending.
Right. I do
Okay.
recall. I do.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so you read the end of the book and you're like, okay, so did they die or did they find what they were looking for?
Right.
And the woman who wrote the book never told you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She did in subsequent books, but it was a reading assignment, so I didn't at the time when I read it when I was younger, there were no subsequent books. She wrote the books
Okay.
like the you know, yeah, you know how authors are. They run out of money, so they start writing sequels, right? Um, so she wrote the sequel like 15 years later, and I read about it on Wikipedia. But you know, when I read the book, there was no definitive ending. So you're like, I kind of feel like it's a betrayal because the author is taking you on this journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
They pick you up at, you know, this guy is you know what, this guy is doing this stuff and he has these problems to overtake. You're like, okay, so how's he going to get out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, oh, he made a false step, went in the wrong direction. Maybe he can correct it. Okay, he looks like he's going to get on top of things. And oh, and now there's another problem, and he's falling in love with this girl, and then all this stuff happens, and then the movie, and then the credits roll, and you're like, wait a minute, did he call her back? Uh, did he pay that gambling debt? Is the Yakuza guy going to shoot him? Like, there's so many. It's like they just forgot to write the third act. And I don't like that because I just invested my money and my time into being told a story. And the storyteller, right when things get interesting, gave me the middle finger. That's the way I look at it sometimes.
I
Um,
understand where you're coming from. Like there's something in the way, I don't know, like just humans are so tied to stories, like we
mhm.
are. Like it's just a fascinating subject, and those stories violate something in our whatever it is that we're tuned into, the way that we dial into the experience of having a story shared with us.
Mhm.
So I mean, I try and like allow for them. I know the feeling that you're describing because I mean I love a great conclusive ending, and I mean there are authors that are great at this and there's authors that are bad. I think like Stephen King notoriously is known as like having horrendous endings, yet you know
Right.
he'll have like a really great beginning and middle, and he'll write that for like several books, but it just his endings, people take there's serious issues there.
Yeah.
What's a favorite author you have then? Like somebody you've really enjoyed, or just story? Like I'm curious about that.
I guess I have to distance myself from the author, but I read Ender's Game.
Oh yeah, sure.
So
Just
Orson Scott
yeah,
Card,
yeah,
he
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of was like this.
He's had a
Yeah,
few
he wrote the
issues.
book in like 1984 or 1985 or something. It
Right.
won Nebula Awards in the
Yeah.
80s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I read it in the late 90s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
and I loved the story. And then he had two different series that arced off of the first book.
Right.
I read 100% of one, and then I tried to read the book. I read one full book on the second series,
Mm-hmm.
and then half the book on the third. I'm like, I'm out. I'm just it's just got too philosophical for me, so I was like, forget it.
Okay.
But yeah, the one series he did was about like very real like military and strategy and stuff like that, and these are the people that all the moving parts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I really liked that series because it all made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got into the other series got into like, why are we here? Are humans the only species? Should we dominate other species? And you're just like, dude, just tell a story. Like, I'm not here to, I don't know. It wasn't for me. The other side of the coin wasn't for me. But
Right.
yeah, they made the movie, which was it was pretty bad. I didn't really like the movie that much. I was really looking forward to it, but
mixed feelings as well. Mixed feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad they made it, but it really should have been like, Harry Potter, like the last book got 2 movies, right?
Mm.
So like this, there was enough material there where I think they should have done 2 movies.
Yeah,
But,
I would. I'd agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there are so many, if people aren't familiar with it, but they had this battle room and there were so many things that happened.
Mm-hmm.
They showed like the first one and they showed the last one, but there was such a progression of things that happened.
Yeah.
That, and there was a finite chapter on, well, they defeated them doing this, and then they were ready for them the next time, so they changed their strategy and they did this and that,
Right.
and it all made sense. And then he had like the extra training sessions and everything. I'm gonna go on and on because I really love the book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Book was great.
It's a great book. Yeah.
It's a fantastic book, and the Hegemon series after that was fantastic.
Mm.
But the movie was like, yeah, we're going to get this done in about 90 minutes. And you really can't do that in 90 minutes.
For sure. But as an example of, one of the stories that you're really, really fond of, Ender's Game, eh?
Yeah, that was really good. And in the first chapter, first 3 chapters anyway,
Mm-hmm.
The main character says like, if I'm going to win a fight, I got to make it. I'm not just winning today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm winning tomorrow and the week after and the month after that.
Yeah.
And he said, because he got into a fight at school.
Yes. Yes.
And he said, I could have stopped, but then tomorrow he would, his nemesis would have bothered him again. He said, so I had to stop it forever. And now I don't have to fight anymore.
Yes.
And that kind of resonated with me. Mm-hmm. Because, of my personal experiences in life, you can't just like push something aside for the day because it'll always come back to haunt you. So you have to Absolutely. Say, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it right the first time. And then I don't have to worry about it ever again. Totally. So like that stuck with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Some really iconic, fantastic, the roots of human nature kind of scenes mm-hmm. coming out of that. Really good stuff. I really like, it wasn't really subtle, but I believe it's like one of the first times where he's going up to anybody assume we're just going to do spoilers through this whole thing. So you've been, this wasn't huge, but it was, again, it stuck out to me where it was like subtle, but it was significant. It felt like so real, where they were like going up to the ship, like they were like between whatever
to the battle school,
Yeah. And the guy compliments him, but like specifically so it alienates him with the other kids.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, what a subtle, but like shared human experience. Like if you've ever been in school, like how everybody has known what that's like, but it's weird because it shows such a like human dynamic where you'd think that how could a compliment hurt you, but in the way that it follows with the way that we treat each other and how we feel in relation to our peers, how that would be damaging. I was like, this is sweet. I was like, it's just like really thoughtful, cool stuff. And definitely that sticks out, that scene that you described at the beginning, which is awesome. It's
that book was very well written. It has a clear beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
And a lot of sci-fi doesn't have that. So
sure.
I'll go back to Battlestar Galactica. They did the remake series in like the early 2000s or whatever.
Okay.
And you're in there for, I think it was 5.5 seasons it ran or something like that.
Okay.
So you watch like 60 episodes or whatever it is. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, well, this happened. And you're just like, there wasn't even a writer's strike. Like if there was a writer's strike, it would have ended better than this. Right. But, it just goes back to like that you invest so much time and you want to know all the story angles, and like this was never explained. And then this character goes, I have to leave now. And they disappear for no reason. And you're like, what? And like, you can kind of like go back to like, oh, well, in the second season, this happened to her. Maybe she was really this and that. But it was never explained. It was never explicitly said. And I think for me anyway, I don't want to guess at what the ending of the story is.
Sure.
I want to know this is what happened. Right. Like Ocean's 11, right? Great movie.
Conclusive.
Okay. I'm talking about the George Clooney one. I never saw the one in the 60s.
Yeah.
But you go through the story once, and he got bamboozled, and like, oh my God, how did that happen? And then they showed how they bamboozled him step by step. And you go, okay, great. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, and it's done in an entertaining way.
Closure.
So you go, okay, great. I understand what happened now. I saw it from this one guy's perspective. He got bamboozled. And then I showed it from the con artist's perspective, and it made it even better. So like you can do a good job without people guessing at what happened. So to me, it just sounds like lazy writing. I don't know.
Do you see some value in this? I'm curious your opinion on it, where like a lot of, much as we enjoy closure and conclusions, in fact, so much of our lives don't get that satisfaction. There are many strands of our experience that end up with unanswered questions that perhaps some of these authors or directors are expressing that part of human experience. I mean,
I have to disagree with you a little bit here. So for example, let's say like, you were supposed to meet this girl, or you're supposed to call this girl for a date on the weekend, and you never called her, right? And then 20 years later, you can go, oh man, I wonder what would have happened. Well, no, what happened was you blew her off, and that's the end of that story, right? So I don't know. I mean, you could always go, what if? And actually, that's going to be a new Marvel movie, I guess, that's coming out, or TV series or whatever.
Okay.
What if? But you can always wonder, like, what happened? What would have happened if I did something different or whatever? But, we write our stories every day with the actions we take. And, if you're supposed to meet your friends at the bar at 6 and you decide, I'm not going, and I'm not going to call anybody and tell them I'm not coming, you just don't show up. Like, you wrote that story, right? You blew your friends off, right? So now your friends will react to that. Maybe they'll call you. Maybe they won't. Maybe you'll never talk to them again. And 20 years later, you can go, I should have gone to Dave's birthday party. I should have gone. I should have made him at 6. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. But, you wrote that story. It's not open-ended anymore. You performed an action or didn't perform an action, and there was a direct result because of that.
I see.
In film, it's not exactly like that, right? Because you're getting a slice of life, or you're getting a specific story. And, if that scene was in a movie, right? People blew him off at the bar or whatever. I didn't show up to Dave's birthday party. What would the director do? It would show you and some friends at the bar and going, geez, Jay didn't show up. Right. And then it would cut back to whatever I'm doing, and there would be a scene,
Mm-hmm.
And that scene would cost money for the director to make, right? Okay, we need to rent a bar out. We need to get a whole bunch of extras. We need to give everybody drinks. And then we need to film Dave going, Jay was supposed to show up. He didn't show up. And then we cut back to the rest of the story, right? Because it's written. It happened, right?
Yes.
But you could always have that off camera, right? You could always have that not happen. But I don't know, like if that was the, that's a pretty bad ending of a movie, I guess. But at least there would be some sort of consequence. And it would suck if like the ending of the movie was we have to be at the bar by 6, and then you don't know if they ever make it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're like, the whole point of the movie is to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And then you never know if it happens or not. So you're like, well, I just wasted 90 minutes of my life and, $15 to not get any questions answered.
Well, I suppose, yeah, I see where you're coming from. The one thing I'd want, if I had you elaborate more on it, where it sounds like you were describing it from where I was saying sometimes you have that we can't author our experiences. What about those instances? Because where you have the choice of this character who may or may not go to the bar, whether or not they go, because it's in their agency, it's their choice whether or not they go. But what about the experiences that happen in our lives where we seem like as puppeted by invisible hands, like that kind of experience? You know what I mean? Where you're like, it almost seems like something was fated outside of your agency.
Like you get hit by a bus on the way to the train station or something.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. There you go. Exactly.
But
yeah.
Then you have an answer. Jay didn't go to the bar because he got hit by a bus.
Okay.
If that's the story, that's the story.
Okay. I like it. I'm thinking, I suppose then perhaps it's all right then if you're making the point about sort of like the invisible hand, because some of the movies I like, do you know, I'd be curious, like, did you ever see the movie Magnolia?
That's one that's been on my list for a long time.
I'd be so curious what your experience of that one would be. It's one
Not
of these
Steel Magnolias, Magnolia,
and it seems these seemingly unconnected people's lives and how they intertwine with each other. It's got like Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it. It's got like John C. Reilly of all people with a great dramatic performance. It's got like Tom Cruise actually with a great performance, and it's really, really cool. But one of these, like, what are the invisible strings in our lives? It's just an interesting topic, I suppose, like, because I feel less predisposed to like a particular preference in those things, because I share with you the sort of frustration sometimes where I want that, but then I'm always curious if it ever makes me feel like some other way. Because I guess the other thing that has to be noted is that sometimes it's done well, sometimes answers are not presented well, and then sometimes, like you said, I mean, there's no way that there aren't cases of just lazy writing. So for someone to try and like sell that as though they were having some sort of like creative point, but really they just didn't know how to finish, is something different from where somebody can express that feeling of fate in a different way. It's kind of
a good movie. You've probably seen it, but it's called Mr. Nobody. I had to look it up on my phone again.
Yeah, sure.
That is a great movie because it shows a man's life. And if he made a left turn, this happened. If he made a right turn, that happened. And it showed the whole progression of his life having traveled down that path.
Right.
That was a great movie. I really like that movie.
That was really, really cool. Very different. I mean, I've seen it a while ago now, but I really enjoyed it. Really, really.
Yeah. I saw it. Whew. I guess it came out in 2009, so I must have saw it 10 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, wild. Okay. Yeah. Stupid time flying.
Yeah, right.
Shouldn't do that so much. I was showing the kids today, or this past week, they're just like wrapping up everything, so it's cool. We're showing them a few movies, and I showed them the new Jumanji that has like, who is it, like The Rock
and Kevin Hart
Hart, and I was like, yeah, it's like the new Jumanji. But then one of my buddies was like, oh, that's kind of old now, and I was like, what? no, it's not. Wait, when was that made? And then I had to look it up. I was like, oh my god, everything passes so quickly. It's just funny. Oh man.
Yeah, I remember the original Jumanji.
Of course, yeah. Fantastic.
I saw it in the theater with my parents, man. It was a long time ago, but yeah.
Awesome. With Robin Williams, right?
Yep.
Peace be upon him. What a
yeah, of course,
man. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, Jay. It's I'm sure we could talk. I love the movie topic. I love the book stuff. I can just that goes on eternally. But I don't want to take any more of your evening. But thank you very much for coming on. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please do rate, subscribe, and all that good stuff wherever you're catching it, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts or on the actual dedicated channel itself. Thank you very much, Jay, for coming on, and perhaps in the future we can get you on again and get to the bottom of this movie discussion.
Sounds good.
Cheers.